Hello and welcome to the Ensuring 100% Backup Recoverability webinar by AppAssure. My name is Joe Hand. I am the Senior Director of Product Strategy. I'm going to take you through one of our key technology areas that make it so that when you leave the shop at the end of the day, you can actually head home and have a good night's sleep knowing that you can recover in any scenario. So we start out with, there are three groundbreaking technology areas that we normally would cover. Today we're going to focus in on one of them. Live recovery is, simply put, the ability to flip a switch and have your users back to work. It gives you near zero recovery time objective, or RTO. The third one, universal recovery, is exactly as the name implies. It's anything to anything. So if you had to recover an email or a file or a SharePoint document or a subsite or a farm, or you had to recover a volume or an entire server, if you wanted to recover a physical server to the virtual space, if you wanted to recover a virtual server to a physical machine, anything to anything. So today we're going to focus in on number 2, Recovery Assure. All right, and this is what gives us 100% guaranteed reliability that our data is actually going to be recoverable. So, obviously, we all know what can go wrong, right? One of our worst fears is seeing the blue screen of death in the morning when we come in and look at the server, right? If you're running Exchange, when your Exchange server is down, your users can't get access to their mail. Right? You have a disk that goes bad. You get that dreaded Windows delayed write failed message in the corner. Right? So these are some of the things that happen on a daily basis that we try and protect from. So the problems themselves that we face, they're numerous. There's first and foremost, growth. Growth is a huge thing, right? So think in terms of how many servers and applications you run. Right? Every time a new application comes out that can add value to your world, it's something to be considered. Right? There's the sheer amount of data. Right? So look at a copy of Microsoft Word from 6-8 years ago and take the exact same document and type it into Word 2010. And the file size is dramatically larger. Right? Look at all the rich media that we work with today that we never did in the past, right? In the past, we had simple document formats, things like that. Now we have voicemails that automatically flow into our email system. We have the concept of MP3s and other, types of media, video, right? Lots and lots of rich content. So the data amount is growing exponentially. How much of it is critical? Right? If you ask any business unit, most of the time the answer you'll get is all of it's critical. And then the other thing that we see growing, and hopefully, if our business is doing well, the user community, right? So everything grows. On the flip side of that, what doesn't grow? Well, budgets typically, it's very, very seldom that the boss comes in and says, "Hey, by the way, we've just gotten double our IT budget for next year. What was it you really, really wanted to buy but we couldn't afford last time?" Right? That never happens. The other thing that gets reduced is SLAs. It used to be, maybe 5-10 years ago, your email server went down. Okay, we'll get it back up. Now it's so critical that if it's down for more than 5 minutes, people panic. They can't communicate. Right? Then comes the world of virtual. Virtual machine technology has pretty much taken over. In the year 2011, we passed the inflection point of more virtual machines being deployed than physical, right? In terms of copies of Windows and numbers of servers. So these are some real things that that we have to look at and look at ways to solve some of these issues. So let's take a look at some of the old ways, right? So the legacy backup tools. right? How do they handle, something new and exciting? Well, they take their existing core technology and they bolt on features, right? Look at the virtual world. A lot of these products were written long before virtual technology ever came out, right? So now they have to actually adopt in some way so that they can, better understand that environment. But you're bolting on a feature to an already existing product that may or may not be the best way to protect that new world, right? The other thing is, and this goes back to the beginning, they've never been application aware. They understand files. That's all they do. The newer tools that hit the market, right? So these are some products that may be developed for a specific platform like VMware. They don't address multi-platform environments. Can you do physical and virtual? No, right? So you have a siloed approach. You have a product that runs on your virtual world. You have a product that runs on your physical world. Now you have two that you have to manage. Some of them can be very difficult to set up and maintain, right? So you actually, in a lot of cases, have to build out a pretty big infrastructure to handle backup. It might include multiple proxy servers to route data through. It might include multiple virtual networks. Inadequate tests of application data and its recoverability, in the sense that, one of these products actually pings the port. Well, what if the port were still open, but the database corrupted? Right? How would you know after powering on a virtual machine that this is actually going to work in production? All right? So how did they solve this problem? Well, the legacy approach was pretty simple, right? It does a complete backup of the environment, of the system, from one end to the other, file-based, and then it goes back and starts at the beginning and reads through the entire backup and compares it to the original media, right? It doubles your backup time, which, that thing in parentheses, so admins rarely bother, that's actually the first thing to go when you start missing your windows, right? So you start your backups at 7 p.m. on Friday, come in Monday morning, and it's halfway done. That's because your window is shrinking. So the first thing you get rid of is the verify option, and that cuts it back down. Now you have no protection whatsoever. They're not application aware. They only look at blocks, right? So the result is we just don't know. Obviously, the way around this, and a lot of companies do this, is they keep a machine or two handy, and periodically they will take a random tape off the shelf and they'll restore it and see if it works. And if it does, that's fantastic. But who's to say that the next one, the one sitting right next to that one, is going to work? Right? The stuff that's more recently come on the market with a myopic vision of a platform, right? They test the data, but to do that, you have to create a virtual machine, right? And then a couple of simple steps. Right, the process wouldn't take more than a half an hour to an hour to set up. But here's the problem with this, right? You're going to build virtual machines to mirror your current virtual machine environment. Let's say you build a nice little 2-node ESXi 5 cluster, right, where you have vMotion to take machines between each node, and you set them up with maybe 6-8 nodes on each. And they're running along great. So where in that system do you have additional overhead to build another 12 to 14 machines or 12 to 16 machines? And even if you did, how could you test them? By powering them on without impacting production. Well, the only way you could do it is do it at night, and that puts you right back in the legacy world of one backup per day. All right? Versus AppAssure, where we can do, without impacting the production boxes at all, 1 to 2% hit on the CPU, we can back up up to as frequent as every 5 minutes, giving you 288 backups per day. Okay. So how do we do it? 100% reliability. That's a pretty bold claim. First thing we do, verify your backup. All right? So we go through and we look at everything from a volume perspective. So on the AppAssure core server or media server, we have a virtual disk driver that enables us to literally reassemble your volume from whatever point in time we choose. So once per night, we actually look at the health of the volume. Now, depending on the application, might be SQL, might be Exchange, we verify the application as well. For SQL, we're only verifying it once per night. For Exchange, we're doing it after every snapshot. The application data is the most critical piece in this whole thing. So what does it look like? So on the left-hand side of the screen, this is basically going to stay the same through the next couple of slides. A backup occurs by sending over just the changed blocks. The changed blocks go over to the AppAssure server where they're compressed and deduped and they're put to rest here in the repository. Now, for the volume integrity check, which happens on every server, every volume, once per night, once that time of night comes, we mount all the volumes right here on the AppAssure server. So it's literally mounted from the point in time of the last snap before this occurs. It goes back, it mounts the full, it knits together all of the incrementals between then and the current point in time, and it creates a view. Once the view is created, the next step is literally mounting it as a Windows volume mount point. Now that I have it mounted, I run check disk on each one of the volumes. So check disk actually has 4 phases. We run the first 3. All right, the fourth one is the exhaustive, one that takes hours and hours to run. We run the first 3. We look at things like the files, the headers, the MFT, file allocation table, security descriptors, file descriptors, all the components that make a volume whole. And once it's complete, we give it a green check mark. If any problems occur, if we detect any issues whatsoever, we send notifications. Now, SQL Server, we do that test on the SQL Server as well, the volume integrity test, but at that same time, while we have the volumes mounted, using a local instance of SQL, we will actually go one step further and attach each one of the databases that is stored on these volumes and test them for attachability. All right, so when you take a database and you bring it online, you attach it, it goes through its own recovery steps, all right, which is check the headers of the files, make sure they're good. Check to make sure that the log files are intact and they're reporting as present, accounted for. Right? Bring the thing online momentarily and make sure it works. Make sure it's shut down clean. So on a nightly basis, I get that assurance that if I have to do this recovery, I know it's going to work. Now, Exchange is a little different. With Exchange, we're actually doing it after every snapshot. All right? We call it a mountability check. Same concept. We build the volume, the mount point, and we go through and we mount each one of the databases. Then on a nightly basis, we go in and we run what we call a detailed integrity check, which is the ESEUtil/K from Exchange. And now I'm looking at the database from a page-by-page perspective. It's an inspection of the entire database, and I know that I can recover. So what are the benefits? Number one, everything is fully automated. You don't have to do random restoring. You don't have to go through the process of checking after the product because the product is doing it for you. We're testing the application data as well. We're not just pinging a port. We're interrogating the data the way the application interrogates the data. You set it and you walk away. You completely reduce your TCO, total cost of ownership, based on the fact that you don't have to sit and babysit this thing. You don't have to go through random restore testing. None of that matters. All right? If you're replicating the data to another site, during replication we do a checksum to make sure the data is the same. So once it gets to the other side in the DR environment, we know it's good. And you get peace of mind. That's a huge benefit. Let's take a look at the product now. Let me just find it here. There it is. Our little lab environment here. All right, so from the beginning, right, to set this thing up, we're going to go out to what's known as the core server. Right, we're going to click that, and then we deploy the software. We can do that through a push agent wizard, or we can run setup.exe, or we can script it. If it's a large install, they're straight MSI files. Put an answer file together and deploy to wherever you got to go. We hit the protect button. I'm going to add a server that's already on the list, so it's going to give us an error, but at least it's going to let us continue. We'll choose the storage pool that we want to use to store the recovery points for this server. There's our error telling us it's already protected. So the next screen you come to, here we get a choice of, protect all the volumes, or let me decide later. Start immediately, or let me pick a future time. And then the first option down here for Recoverability is perform the nightly integrity check, and that's selected by default. On the next screen, this is specific to Exchange because it has detected it is an Exchange server. By default, we will validate the mailbox store as mountable, so we don't have to check anything there. The only things we have to add are the nightly integrity check. We're going to change it to every night, and to truncate the old Exchange logs, right? So we don't build up a surplus of Exchange logs and crash the volume. At that point, you hit finish, and that's it. It would do its initial full, and after that, it would revert into the interval you set, as frequent as every 5 minutes, or as seldom as every 2 weeks, or anywhere in between. Right? And at that point, it'll start testing as it goes. In the case of Exchange, if I go to the Recovery Points tab here, you'll see that I have green checks next to all of my backups. I'm on a 15-minute interval. That gives me 96 a day, so since midnight last night, it's done 69 backups. And I know each and every one of them are good because they've passed the test. Now on the SQL side, like I said, we do those once per night. So if I scroll down to, somewhere in the middle of the night here, you can see that this one was tested. If I expand it, you can see both the volume integrity and the MS SQL Server testing was done. And I can drill in, and I can actually see individually what it did. Alright, so this is actually my SharePoint server. So those are all my databases, and these are the ones that were tested. The volume integrity, it shows F and G were both tested. On the C drive, I have my system databases, right? So I have my master and my model and my tempdb and my MSDB, right? So all of those are here, all tested successfully, right? And the C drive and the SRP. So we know at this point in time everything's healthy. Let's say, just for giggles, that come midnight tonight, the most recent recovery point around that time turns up with a red X. That means somewhere between this red X and this green check, something went wrong. So how would I figure out where my good data is? Very simply, I could just right-click here and say Force Recovery Point Check. And I could do that to a series of them, go get a cup of coffee, let it do its magic in the background. The old way of figuring this out was to do a restore. Wait for that restore to complete, try and attach your database. If it fails, guess what? dump everything you've just spent the last 8 hours restoring and go to the previous night, and so on and so on and so on until you find good data. In my world, all I have to do is right-click, and I can make the selection. It'll do the testing in the background without actually having to do or restore, and that's it. I'm done. All right, so that's going to test in the background. It'll come up in a couple of minutes, and we'll see a green. You should see a green check over here. All right, we can actually watch it in the events by going to the core level and clicking on the events tab, and we'll see in real time as things happen. So you can see here performing attachability test for SQL database, secure store service DB, blah 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 blah. All right, and then it says here was successful. Right. So once that all completes, I'll know exactly where my good data lies and where my bad data is. At the end of the day, the most important thing, oh, there it goes green. The most important thing is that with this level of automation and this level of testing, you don't have to do anything. It's all done for you. Now, if there's some reason to believe that this is not what it appears to be, and you want that ability to power this thing on and see that it does work, we have a feature we call Virtual Standby that'll enable you to build a virtual machine copy of this machine that you're protecting. Doesn't matter whether this one's physical or virtual, right? It doesn't have to be, this could be it can actually even be a VMware machine, and you can build it into a Hyper-V format. It doesn't matter for us. Universal recovery, right? Anything to anything. So I can build a copy, put it into what we call continuous mode, which will enable me to do my original build of the machine, and after the machine is built, based on my snapshot interval, keep updating it. Now, let's say the weekend comes and I want to run a test. All I have to do is suspend my exports and power on the machine. Obviously, I want to keep it isolated on a separate network, so I won't, obviously bring this thing online and have it cause split brain with the application that's running on it. But it's fairly straightforward. At that point, you can bring this thing online. You can go into it through its console. You can inspect it, check it, do whatever you got to do to it, and know that you're good, you're safe. Now, the beauty of this is via replication. You can see here I've got a replication target defined, Core 2. On Core 2, I can do the same thing. So I can create a virtual standby on Core 2 for my production machine in Site 1, enabling me to do a complete failover in case of a disaster. All right? So I know the data is good here because it was tested in Site 1, and then when it got here, it was checksummed to make sure it was identical. So the three groundbreaking technologies, again, live recovery, right, and we cover this in the top 3 technologies webinar. Assured recovery, 100% guarantee. My data's good. It's application aware. We know the data's good. Universal recovery, the ability to recover anything to anything. What does it look like on the board? Very simply put, your virtual and physical machines in Site A are being protected by a local core server. Right? They go into a deduplicated repository, some kind of disk that you have here. Hardware agnostic, we don't really care about what you set us up on as long as we have the ability to perform. You can replicate it off-site using an SSL encrypted link. Right? Off-site, you've got an AppAssure core server set up. You can have your virtual standby machines, and this whole thing can exist in your basement or the cloud or any place in between. Right? It could be in a colo facility, it could be across the campus, it could be in another data center, it could be halfway around the world. Doesn't matter. AppAssure, the #1 backup and replication product on the market. Why are we #1? Well, it's the fastest image level application-aware product on the market today. Near zero RTO. Again, the ability to flip a switch and have access to my data instantly. 5-minute RPO, right? Real 5-minute RPO. Not, hey, we can do snaps very frequently and reality says you can't. We can. No impact to the box, 1 to 2% CPU hit. Built from the ground up for both virtual and physical environments. We were written in this century. It's a pretty cool thing. Number 1 in growth, right? So from a backup vendor perspective on the Inc. 500 list, right? 3,450% growth in 3 years as a company. That's something to be said. This is a market, by the way, that's growing at 4 to 6% annually. So we're doing okay here. 7th fastest growing software company. That's not just backup. That's all software. We've got over 6,000 customers in 51 or more countries. 1,200 partners that are capable of bringing this solution to your door. We've won a ton of awards. Right, most recently, Virtualization Review Magazine, Best Disaster Recovery. At the tail end of 2011, 2 gold stars from Windows IT Pro. Right, 1 for backup and 1 for disaster recovery. Customers, yes, we have everything from, a simple 1-server mom and pop shop all the way on up to some of the biggest companies in the world using our software today. Want to thank you for attending. If anybody needs any additional information, obviously you can go to AppAssure.com. Up there you'll also find a 14-day free trial, fully functional. Don't take my word for it. Take a look at the product. It does what it says it's going to do, and it does it well. All right. If you want to get in touch with a sales rep, just send an email to sales@AppAssure.com, and they'll be more than willing to help you. For partners and managed service providers, there's separate landing pages for you guys. AppAssure.com/MSP and AppAssure.com/partners. Go ahead and hit us on Twitter. Tell the world, what a wonderful webinar you just witnessed at AppAssure with the backup keyword. Facebook.com/AppAssure. And stop on by the blog. All right, blog.appassure.com. I do a lot of writing on the blog. So if there's something you're interested in hearing about, getting more information on, leave me some comments on one of the other ones that I've written, and I'll be more than happy to entertain any suggestion that comes in. Till next time, again, my name is Joe Hand. I am the Senior Director of Product Strategy. It was a pleasure speaking with you all today. Have a great day.